So in one of the questions that I got, I know we talked about this beforehand, so I kind of prefaced it a little bit, but one of the things that came up quite a bit in the conversation we had last month was the feeling of almost selling out in order to be able to sell something. Like we just talked, you have your personal pieces and you have the work that you will sell. Do you feel like you have to sell out in order to sell a piece of work?
Yeah, you know, so yeah, we did talk about this earlier, and this was my question, my return question to your question, and maybe you guys can put this in the comments. What do you think it means to sell out? Like, what does selling out in order to be a earning artist mean? Because I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. Lauren says selling out would mean creating art based on what you think would sell rather than what you believe in. So in that sense, no, I haven't had to do that.
Okay.
Right? Because here's what happened. Here's what formed the type of art that I make. And this wasn't intentional at first, but now it's a very intentional thing that I do. When I go to an art museum, I look at what's there and what calls to me, right? And then I take the inspiration back to what you do when you create. But more than that, I was looking at what composition is appreciated, right? What composition is being put in people's homes when you start looking at the art of successful people and the art of the greats from the past. And then what I realized, the thing about central weighting, I realized that the rule of thirds and most of the rules of composition do not apply to the experience of art, right? So when I compose my work now, I will intentionally photograph my work because of how the audience will view it. And people don't look at composition in terms of which section of the art is on. The first thing psychologically, physically that people notice is light, differences in lights, right? So luminosity difference. The second thing is contrast, and then it's or maybe it's light, then color, so light, contrast, and then sharpness. Mm-hmm. So those three things are how people experience art. So I'm not going to create a piece that fits into the rule of thirds because it would score well on a photography competition. I'm going to create a piece that's going to guide someone in the triangle to keep them inside of the artwork. So am I shaping my art based on what good art is or what the greats did in the past, the painters? Yes. Do I think that's selling out? No. I took what works. You know, it's basically I went to school, go to the museum and go into school, take that home and you apply it to your work. And then I took that but I didn't I applied that to what I was creating, to what fit inside my story. So if you go on my website, you'll notice like everything, especially all the new pieces, have very extensive, elaborate stories, because the story, the translated idea from what they see to what's actually in their head is really, really important. So yeah, no, I don't think I sell out. Do I go to places and comp stomp? No. I think that might be selling out. You know, like going to that one great arch thing that everyone photographs, or that tree in Portland. I won't even take a photo of it because I just feel like, one, I couldn't do it in my own way. That'd be stand out, and two, I would just be copying a composition because other people sell it. So that's kind of a mixed bag of answers. I don't know. I hope that helps.
No, I think it definitely does, because I like what you said there, because, you know, I do critique sessions where I'm talking about composition and I'm talking about these things on what makes a good photo. And sometimes what makes a good photo doesn't necessarily mean what makes a sellable photo because of how we relate to that thing. I know that there's times where I've shot very specific ways because of the way it connected with me, and it breaks all the rules. It shows symmetry. It doesn't do rule of thirds. There's no golden ratio, but for some reason it speaks to me, right? And there's no compositional rule that's going to say what's going to speak to someone, but we get hung up on these compositional things. And I think it's good for people to hear that too, that you don't necessarily have to get hung up on the compositional thing as long as that thing is speaking to you and it's telling your story through the work.
Composition is really important. There is, like, you have to stick with some sort of composition, but I think that the rules of photography, because this is all photographers, right?
Yeah.
Like our whole crew.
Everyone's all photographers, yeah.
Yeah. The rules of photography don't exactly translate to the rules of or the way people experience art, right? So you can do your photo that doesn't fit into the rules of photography, but I think the rules of composition that apply to people, that affect people when they are buying art, are more painter examples, the use of light versus where things go.
So it's like composition has its own new bracket then.
Yeah, I think there's another bracket. Yeah, I think there's another way, another school of composition that I think is more applicable to art than photography, because there is a difference between art and photography.
Right. Oh, yeah.
A camera is a tool, and most people use it to document something, right? And even if you spice it up, I have this thing that I say that the people in the Art of Selling Art, the membership course that I have, don't like. And I categorize a whole bunch of things I say as unpopular opinions. But just because you photographed it doesn't make it art, right? And if you don't like it, that's fine. But the majority of the real world that's buying art doesn't consider photography art. The highest selling photograph is still under 10 million. I think it's like 6 million, right? Whereas Beeple just sold a $69 million piece of digital art. So the art world is more ready. The art world is more ready to accept any kind of creative painting than they are creative documentation.
Wow.
So the rules of photography that we learned as compositional for photographs, they don't translate to the people who are buying photography as art, because it doesn't translate the feeling that you're trying to get to them the way it does. And a lot of people are doing photos for other photographers. And I know. I guess everyone wants to talk about business a lot, but this is the mindset that I think a lot of people have to change when they're lens-based artists. Like, I don't shoot for other photographers. I don't shoot for other photographers to be like, "Oh, you have a really cool photo," because most of them don't think it is. Right? I want to shoot to tell my story, and I want to shoot to use, in the compositional elements and tools I use come from painters.
That's interesting, because I do find myself a lot of times shooting for photographers, and I'm a classically trained artist. I've been painting since I was like 7 years old. I went to school got my BFA in printmaking, sculpture, and all this other stuff. And I feel like I've made a sacrifice in myself to not approach my art as much as I approach photography. And I don't think I have ever made that connection until right now. So this webinar has probably been more important for me than anybody else in here. Thank you.
Happy to talk about this anytime.
That's awesome.
So what you just watched was a snippet from an interview that I did with Jason Matias. If you're interested in seeing more from this interview, go ahead and click this playlist right here. If you're interested in the Art of Selling Art, Jason's flagship education for teaching artists how to sell their work, go ahead and click here. And I would also encourage you to consider subscribing to myself and Jason Matias. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.